Wildsmith, the artist.
Yes, still Adrian Wildsmith, the artist.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thanks for being here. So
My pleasure.
yeah, just wanted to really connect with you and have a chat about all things Adrian. So artistically, spirituality, healing, anything that you've got to kind of contribute on that, really, mainly focusing on your art, really, because you are a fantastic artist, and I will share lots of images within the video so that people can kind of see what you do. And yeah, so I just really wanted to share with people what it is you do, who you are, what inspires you, and how you've got to where you are. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Blimey, where do I start? So
on the spot.
Well, yeah, go all the way back. Well, I was in my very early years. My dad and my mum were a bit of an adventure as well. I'm not sure my mum would totally agree with it. To have that as a description, but she followed my dad, where they decided to sell up everything in the UK.
Okay.
And his business and everything, and he built himself a boat or a yacht, as the posh version might be, and I kind of started my life on the water. I'm Aquarius, so and I know we've talked about star signs and a bit of astrology, which I think is absolutely awesome that you do. And so yeah, I lived quite an adventurous life, I guess. We traveled all over Europe, and down the Seine. Well, we crossed the my dad didn't know how to drive a boat. And he kind of smacked in on the maiden voyage. I think he smacked into about 6 other boats and had to go around and give him his details and give him insurance and kind of go around and start fixing. Yeah, it was horrendous. He just didn't realize what it took, because it was quite a large vessel by comparison to the little dinghy that he used to sail with. And so yeah, and we traveled across Europe, over the Channel. And that was absolutely flipping horrendous. As a young boy of about 9 or something, and I swear to God, I thought we were going to die.
Wow.
The storm was just horrendous. I don't think we'd really. I think there might have been a point my mum thought, have we bitten off more than we can chew here? Because we weren't, and my dad and I don't have the ceiling. We get really seasick, both my dad and I, really badly. I mean, my sister and my mum were fine, so not a particularly good combination. But we did it. We ended up getting into Paris. We lived in Paris for a while, and in fact, right under Notre Dame Cathedral. I don't think you're allowed to moor there anymore. I think they'll quickly move you on, but we got away with it back then. In the day, so there's lots of stories to share, but ended up settling in Gibraltar as a really young boy and went to school there, and then returned to the UK, and life took on a whole kind of different meaning, and back, I mean, fast forwarding really, quickly to sort of a few years ago, I unfortunately, well, I don't know whether it was unfortunate, but I think it's what I needed. I had an absolutely tsunami of a mental health sort of breakdown, and basically I've spent the last 10 years kind of recovering from that. I guess you break down to break through, is kind of a phrase that you might have heard bantered about, which I think there's a lot more truth to it than people might think. But at the time for me, and I'm sure it is for anyone that who's listening to this, is it's absolutely terrifying. I was absolutely terrified. And funnily enough, I'm actually currently dog sitting about 10 houses down from the house where I ended up. I thought it would be like a couple of weeks stay with a friend who had offered me his sofa because I just was in no fit state, and because I was essentially homeless, and I was living in my car. So which wasn't working out really. To be honest,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
really struggling with it. And so he offered me, a place, and I thought I'd be there 4 weeks. I was there 4 years. And that was about 10 years ago.
Mm.
Um, and so now, going forward, the journey that I've come on, and kind of a little bit how we've met through Kate, my partner,
Mm.
um, is art suddenly started to appear in my life, and
All right.
creativity and poetry and self-expression began to come forward. But my God, was it painful at times? It was very, very, very tentative for a number of years. And I guess in the last 2 years, it's kind of exploded. And I kind of would actually say I'm an artist now. And I mean,
Mm.
you've seen me, I've done a few exhibitions and things.
Yeah.
And I do commission work, and, share a lot on social media and Facebook in particular. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, but there's lots of nuances, within that. I mean, I've given you, snippets
Yeah.
of like 40 years,
No.
so that's kind of me, as today. I mean, I do actually work for Mine, the mental health charity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a part-time role, by my choice. I wanted to focus on other things, and specifically my art and poetry and creativity, and really moving kind of more into that. I do some mental health training as well on the side, and coaching, so very varied. But my core, as my passion is the art and the
It's the
poetry, and
art.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's where I go with it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
quite busy with pieces that I'm working on at the moment. At Phoenix, I just did recently for a client. Yeah, and it's wonderful, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful to connect, and it's wonderful to sort of share it with the world.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you definitely inspire me. We've had some
Bless you.
conversations
We have,
of yeah, just
yeah,
kind of getting that whole stuckness that artists get. Yeah, I paint.
yeah,
I like to think I paint a lot, but I don't really, because I get stuck.
right,
There's that whole artistic block that comes up, and it's all very emotional, isn't it? It's all very
yeah,
psychological, and
it's
our inner
very much so,
blocks
yeah.
come up, and then we
Mm.
can't express. But so when you were small, were you artistic as a child? I know you come from was it an architectural background, am I right?
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
did train as an architect,
Okay.
and that, yeah, and that kind of was a bit of a false start, because I think as I qualified, we hit a property bust.
uh
The economy went, panned, and
yeah.
every I remember phoning up every architectural practice, and they basically said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I'm just a secretary. I'm manning the phones, because everyone's about to leave and we're
Oh dear.
closing shop." And I don't know how many I called that were,
Wow.
or some were saying, "Well, you could send us our CV, but
Mm.
we don't have much, and it's unlikely we will for a while." But yeah, so my architectural background, that's a kind of the formal training,
Yeah.
which, looking back, it took me a long time to break that everything had to be right angles, everything had to, have a proportion to it. It needed to be straight. It needed to be,
Yeah.
which was, so you were trained to have this very critical eye, because
Yeah.
obviously, you got to make sure that the building's going to stand up. But it really, it's not a creative process. It's a very cognitive one. It's up in the head. So that was a massive barrier that kind of hit me, and thinking, well, how do I get past this? Because um, that line's not straight. My brain was just going, but it's not straight. It's
Yeah.
it's not perfect. It's not right. And so you'd rip it up and tear it up, and you'd scream and shout, and go off and do something entirely different, because you think, well, I can't do this. I'm not an artist. Well, and then you'd
Who
have
do
an
I
absolute,
think I am? Yeah.
yeah, you have a paddy, and then you go off, and then maybe 3 months later, I'd give it another go, for
Yeah.
example. But
Mm.
I finally reached a point where I couldn't tolerate it any longer. I had to address this deep need to express, because it was driving me. And I realized that actually my breakdown, it was an unofficial, I think, psychotic, episode or episodes over a long period of time, which basically I think it was the brain saying, okay, it's time out, Adrian, or the body, the gut was taken over, the body was taken over and saying, look, I'm really sorry, Adrian, but you're overthinking this. And we're going to take over the reins. We're going to go into autopilot. And I just had to do a reset. And I think I then went through this next number of years where it was a case of trial and error. And, it was almost like I'd been given stabilizers and I kept trying to take them off and do my own thing. But then I'd face plant, I'd fall absolutely flat on my face, get it completely wrong. Going, well, how did that happen? And then I'd start again, and it was a lot of trial and error. And I mean, for a while, I couldn't read anything. The only thing that I could do was I could listen to things. So I managed to be able to take a voice in through my ears, and I became best friends with Audible. And I'd walk for miles and miles and hours every day, just listening. And I'm not sure I was entirely listening to what I was hearing, but that's how I began to kind of process, because I wasn't working, I couldn't work, so I'd take my friend's dogs out, and I just did the best that I could with what I had, and it was utterly excruciating, frankly. And I guess because I was making it hard for myself, I wasn't allowing the process to happen, and easier said than done. But when you've lived a life where you've been in control of everything, or you felt control, suddenly that control is taken away, and you're thinking, what the frig, what do I do with this? You're on it's a bit like you're on a roller coaster. When you go on a roller coaster ride at a theme park, and you get that feeling, that butterflies in your stomach. But this was, I'm standing on the ground, I'm looking out of my window, and I've got this feeling where I'm absolutely out of control. Because which is, it was terrifying at the time. But I just got so used to it. It was my default mode. And so, it really was a case of unpicking that and working out, okay, what do I do? And then gradually I began to move forward and try different things. And, and I think, and there was a lot of depression, and I think, and then I think someone told me, well, do you know what the opposite of depression is? And I went, no, well, what's that? And he said, well, it's expression. You need to, you got to express what you're doing. I'm going, what do you mean express? I don't know how to express. I need to earn money, and I need to, pay the bills, and, expression is for someone else. Don't be so that, it's for the elite or whatever. But I actually realized that frustration that was coming up in me was actually the fact that I wasn't expressing, and that part of me deeply wanted to move forward. And in reference to you saying about being stuck, and I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of people coming to me talking about that. Well, how I don't understand. How do you do that? How have you done that? How it's happened? And I guess I think it's recognizing that I was a very emotional person, which I think every human being actually is, but I wasn't acknowledging the emotions. I was completely suppressing them, because I think I'd been taught to do that. I'd been told to do that. I was male, you got to man up,
Or you just don't know how.
You just don't know how. Yeah, you just don't know how to do it. But and I had to find lots of different kind of modalities and strategies and therapeutic approaches to kind of ease myself through. I always think of Han Solo in Star Wars, where he's stuck in that carbonite, whatever it is. He's a slab of carbon, concrete, whatever. And I felt just like that, and I think our bodies, and my body certainly was like that. And that was partly because I, as a very, very young boy, was about 4.5, I was in a car accident, and unfortunately my sister didn't make it. So, you were dealing with that and my mum was driving at the time, so there's the three of us, but my sister didn't get through it. And I think that trauma, you know, of whatever kind it is, and it was a very emotional and a very physical type of trauma, and there was a lot of bereavement and grief, certainly for my mum and dad, which was very, very difficult. And so my body took on this, you know, we need to freeze, we got to stay in this position, and everything's going to be fine so long as you don't move. And my default is to freeze. I think we've talked about it before, haven't we?
Yeah, mine is as well. Yeah,
it's just freezing.
Freeze is safe, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's definitely. But my God, it's draining.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, you think, oh, you know, so for some people, yeah, you know, but certainly for me, I was just trying to think of, but certainly for me, you know, freezing drives me up the wall because I really struggle to organize. I struggle to really make progress. Or if I do, and I'll reach a certain level, and then suddenly that freeze comes in, and so I find it very difficult to keep that progression. And so I'm constantly in a cycle of freeze, and then I'll thaw out, I'll relax, and then I'll start again. But those cycles are much bigger and further apart for me now. But also I wouldn't be able to do what I do now. You know, I wouldn't say I'm stuck in. Well, I think to what you've asked about being stuck, I think the other aspect or side of being stuck is just it's fear.
We get trapped in fear.
We get trapped in is the fear.
I mean,
and I certainly experienced that. Yeah.
That creative process, it's a killer for the creative process. That fear, isn't it? Because it really does stop you. But I mean, in terms of your creative process, do you find that, you know, that your journey, was it like a remedy? Your creativity as you were healing, was it a remedy, or do you think it was a result of your crisis? Which do you think? Which was it?
Wow, remedy. I think it was. It's a byproduct. It's a result of having done. I don't know whether it's having done the work, because it's not like you earn it.
Yeah,
it's not a earning it. It was a. I guess once you thaw out, you know, that concrete, once it starts to break away, and you know, I learned how to give myself permission that it was okay to make mistakes. It was okay to enjoy things. It was okay. It was okay.
Yeah,
that's a big one for you. It's okay. It's okay to treat myself.
Yeah,
it's okay to get it wrong, but it's also okay to get it right. I mean, that's harder. It's actually okay for you to get it right, Adrian. It's actually okay for you to be successful. I'm more fearful of the success than of the failure, because failure is really familiar to me. So it's like, we're in that comfort zone again. I screwed it up. The success is that I don't have control over it.
It's the unknown,
I don't know.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think as human beings, we are terrified of the unknown, unless we have a lot of spiritual awareness and self-awareness and, you know, a bag of confidence, then hopefully we can get there. I think that's the goal. That's where we're heading. That's the intention.
Absolutely.
Get to the point where we're comfortable with success and shaping our own lives.
Yeah. And we've talked about that a number of times. And that's why you're doing this podcast. That's why I'm doing my art. That's why I do the poetry, because but I think you've got to recognize. I mean, I remember normally in the past when I've done, because I do dog sits as a bit of a side thing, because it helps, you know, it's quite a nice thing to do, go away, you know, Kate, she does the same as well. And the kind of like mini retreats to some extent as well. But I think it's and I've completely lost what I was going to say there. It's gone totally on my head. It's totally gone up my head. I think, but it's really about recognizing. Yeah, that was it. Sorry. So I went on a dog retreat. Oh, dog retreat. A
Dog sit.
dog retreat. Yeah, and I put on some fluffy.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's a new thing. Well,
that's
that
a
could
new
be a business idea there. A dog retreat.
dog retreat. Humans going on a dog retreat. Actually, we could learn. Well, we learn a lot from dogs, right? From animals. They know a lot more than we do. No, yeah, I was on a dog sit. Well, maybe about 3 months ago, and um, I really struggled. Suddenly, it just hit me. I was in a really low. I was producing. In fact, I think I was really working on the octopus. I think you've talked to me about it, and I think we talked about you getting so far in a piece similar, wasn't it? I remember we talked once at one of the shows, and I just had to get up at about. I think I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, came downstairs, and I just opened up my poetry book. And what I've done is I write to the poem. Is something that I've found a way of, and I write to the poem
like it's an entity in itself. It's
and
already
say,
born.
look, can you help me out here, because I haven't got a frigging clue what's going on, and I can't tolerate these emotions anymore, and I want to scream, and I'm all on my own, and no family's around, and I want to get out of here, but it doesn't make any sense. I just help me, And the answer that came back, because then I let it go where I'm releasing it, and then I let the poem then reply to me in the poem as a whole. And what came out was a big brother. A brother came forward and he said, well, you got this, buddy. It's all right. I'm here, and it was wonderful to dig into that resource and to recognize that there was an elder, there was a higher understanding person, whatever you want to call it, but he was in the form of a bigger brother, which obviously was me replying and saying, what's your problem? It wasn't actually saying that at all. It was a very compassionate big brother saying, you're okay. You can do this. Find your own way. Just take your time.
So
and I did,
that clear channel between you and your bigger self. It's getting to the point where that channel's clear enough to be able to hear and to communicate, and then for that to come through as creativity. So I know you've worked with some plant medicine, haven't you, in the past? So
yes, I have.
Let's talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, about the impact that's had on your creativity, if you don't mind, because that's really interesting stuff for me.
So I got introduced to ayahuasca, and I had researched it some years earlier, about 3 or 4 years earlier, and it was profound. I mean, but I was in a dark place. I mean, I was in I wouldn't say I'd come through the dark part, the most difficult part, but I was still very resistant, really crippled with anxiety quite a lot. But I was coping. I was kind of managing it. And then I had this experience. I did 2 or 3 of them over a period of time, and I mean, you can't. I wouldn't even know where to begin to try and explain it to you. But other than to say that they were probably some of the most beautiful experiences of my life, and I was very grateful for them. And I think really, essentially, my understanding of my experience of plant medicine has been that really all it does is it's a bit like I'll use the word sledgehammer. It's not, but it could be. It could be a feather duster. It can be so gentle, or it can be whack. Depends what you need and the environment that you're in. And obviously, I was very careful to make sure that I was with people that I trusted, and people that I'd been recommended to, and that I was being very respectful to it. I think that's how you approach it is really, really, really important. And I found myself thinking, well, you know, and I found myself thinking that as I did more and more of it, because I went on a bit of a journey for probably a couple of years, sort of experiencing these different things, was that really the end result was that all I was doing was peeling back and getting rid of the concrete, you know, back to the Han Solo kind of image of him being stuck in, and big chunks were dropping off, you know, and they fell away. But sometimes I think you need a sledgehammer because we're a little bit resistant. I'm not, and I mean that metaphorically. And sometimes, you know, I know people have had experiences where it's been extremely profound or it's been incredibly difficult. And I've had both. I've had incredibly difficult where I've come through them with other kind of medicines where I'm literally weeping on the floor like a boy that just wants his mum. And, you know, there's another part of me going, what the friggin' Epps happened here? But it's what I needed. I needed to go through that. It was cathartic. I needed to let it go. And I mean, I can't say it didn't play a part. I mean, I did something in the early days called Cambo, as you know, which is a very different kind of medicine. Well, yeah, it's a medicine, but it's not psychedelic in any way, as I understand it. And I've had a relationship with, if I can use that phrase, with Cambo, which is like a frog secretion that you put on your arm. It's probably the backbone of my creativity in terms of releasing. I found that, I mean, it's a shame I don't. Oh, I might. Hang on a second. I think I might be able to show you. So yeah, I found my book. It just happens to be here. I think I've got it in here. I think it's in here, where I started to try and do some sketches that were very free-handing. Yeah, that you might be able to see this. So I don't know whether you can see. I don't know whether it's going to come through.
You have to put it near your face, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know whether it might not come through. Yeah, it's a shame, but very well, pretty baby-like, if you like, kind of sketches. And then suddenly, after I began to work with Cambo, things began to shift and I began to be able to create. But to be fair, I mean, I've been working with Cambo for how long now? 6 years.
Okay.
Now, I've heard of stories of people where it's been quite immediate and quite quick. I think because I freeze, freeze is my default. My natural reaction to a lot of plant medicine is there's a threat here. I need to lock down. So it doesn't penetrate as much as it probably could do or benefit me or release me. So I have to tend to work with it really kind of gently. And I'm sure, you know, people listening to this, there might be some who go, well, you know, you got to take a higher dose. And I know, you know, you've just got to crack it. You know, it's part of the ego, you know, you got to, but the way it happened for me was it was progressive. It was gentle. I just kept going and I kept working with it. And then suddenly 2 years ago, I mean, I think you've seen my hummingbird, or I've done a couple of hummingbirds, and suddenly this hummingbird appeared out of nowhere and literally took flight off the page, really. And I got myself an art mentor to help me practically on my journey. I think it's important that, you know, if you want to be more creative, you do need someone who's already been there. And particularly if you're stuck, I think mentoring is such a healthy thing to do. Mentoring or coaching, which is something that I do. And I've had lots of people come to me asking me, you know, and it's something that I'm moving into more kind of creative mentoring and support, you know, for people. Because I've gone through that and I know what it's like. And I think your point, you were saying earlier, you know, it's a very emotional journey, and I don't think I've ever been on any journey. I mean, even including the plant medicine stuff, I don't think even that comes close to the journey of being an artist. It's it just floors me so regularly, and then I have to acknowledge it and get back up again. And it's getting easier, you know, definitely. But you know, whether it's displaying and presenting my art to the public, or whether it's you know, someone asking me how much you know, a piece is, and thinking, oh my God, what do I say? I'm scared I'm going to get it wrong. No, they can't possibly want to buy my art. You know, being, you know, and you go through all these myriad of, you know, sabotage and what's the other phrase? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, self-doubt and all
and
of it.
self-doubt and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you know, so answering your question, and you know, take a long time to answer it. Really, you have to forgive me because I can waffle. Is plant medicine played a part, and I think it's more whatever you're called to, whatever works for you. It won't work the same way for anyone. You know, it'll be different for everybody. You know, in every kind of way, and we have to be gentle with that. And I think probably what's worked the very best for me is compassion
for yourself.
Yeah, and learning that it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. I think I forgot that. I very much, you know, I believed that for a time, you know, I failed as a husband, I failed as a father. I think that is something that I've carried because unfortunately my marriage didn't work out. We had two beautiful daughters, and that's had an astronomical effect, you know, on all of us and on them. And, you know, it's impacted us financially, and, you know, and mental health is a hugely, you know, damaging thing. And if you don't have the right environment, and you don't have the right psychological environment to be able to come through it, you get really stuck really quickly. And I did, you know, I got trapped in that process for a really, really long time. And I'm still reeling from some of that effect. And I'm only really coming out of it now, and really beginning to kind of thrive, which I think is starting to happen, which we are allowed to do. You know, and that it can be consistent, and you can keep going, and you don't need to stop, and it's all right. But you know, I experienced periods of exhaustion where I kind of, but it's actually not exhaustion, it's freeze. But my brain says, oh, you're tired, you need to slow down, Adrian. Well, really? Well, I've only just done, but I feel exhausted. There's an exhaustion, and going, no, hang on a minute. So I've got much better at spotting my particular patterns and going, okay, well, maybe, you know, what I do is I one of the strategies I follow is just 5 minutes. Just do 5 minutes, mate.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's days when so I'll pick up the pen or the brush or whatever, and I only allow, I if I want to go further, I can, but I just say, all we're going to do, and I kind of time it on my watch, you're just going to do 5 minutes. Just do 5 minutes. And that usually, no, we're not going to do a masterpiece. We're not going to do it for 6 hours. We're not going to go all day. It's literally a chip away. And you know, coming back to that time when I was telling you about, I wrote the poem, and kind of the big brother came through. I had the octopus laid out on the kitchen table, and my brain was saying I got it all wrong. You're gonna have to rub it out, mate. You got to start again. And I was saying, well, all right, well, let's give it 5 minutes, and let's just see what it looks like when you go for a walk, make a cup of coffee, take the dogs for a walk, come back, have another look. Might be a bit, you know, it's almost like you're talking to a child. And you know how where the child's going, no, I don't like it, and I got it all wrong. You're going, well, you know, maybe, well, it might be, but give it 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's so weird how 5 minutes can change your world. And some of the best pieces I've ever done is I gave them 5 minutes. Really? I could have sworn to you on my life that I just needed to put it in the bin, but I'd come back, and it was literally like I'd had some new lenses put on my eyes and gone, what? I almost thought someone's come in here and done something because I didn't do that. That can't be me. And then the mindset is so ingrained that it's wrong. You have to do it again. Sorry, mate, but it's not good. Well, it's not good enough. And you're going, well, let's give it. And now, as a regular rule, the moment it comes up, I'll just say, I mean, I'm doing, I don't know, you may have seen on Facebook lately, I'm doing the Phoenix, which is a really big, it's like 4 times bigger than anything I've done before. It's massive by comparison, which has its own challenges. But I've gone through a whole process with that because suddenly I've stepped up. I've times it by 4 now, and I'm now doing stuff that I never did before. And there's lots of complications and difficulties that you wouldn't get on quite a small piece that suddenly it's magnified. So however much you increase the size of it, that's the increase in the challenge that you might have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to be extra slow, patient, careful. And when the energy comes, go for it. When it's not there, extra slow. It's just like you've got, it's like before you were riding a tricycle with two wheels. Suddenly you're in this Mack truck with 6 wheels and it's got massive tires, and you're kind of going, well, if you just turn slightly, you're going to squash back 4 cars. So you've got to be really, really, really gentle, keep it online. And I think that's what it's all about. It's leveling up and leveling up and leveling up. And I'm grateful that I've had that opportunity, and I'm able to do that now.
Yeah, so you take a lot of your inspiration from nature, don't you? A lot of your work is nature based, animals, plants. So and a lot of it is very otherworldly as well. Some of your black and white stuff is very otherworldly, isn't it? So has that come from the plant medicine? Is that where that's come from? You've drawn that from your experience?
The black and white ones that I did 3 big black and white pieces. They're really quite large. They took about 6 months each to do, roughly, and I did them over COVID, and that was just after the first couple of experiences, and I found this incredible reverence and newfound love for nature, and particularly the ocean and sort of whales. And I was drawn to the endangered kind of species, and the ones that I picked up, the 3 of them were the manta ray, trying to get the technical words for them now, the humpback whale, and the turtle. And so I kind of flipped the world on its head, and as above, so below, I think was the phrase that was the quote that just kept reverberating in my head, and I had to get it down on paper. And I had this idea of, I was really drawn to these really elongated kind of Japanese type sort of styles. And and you've seen, I don't know whether I've shown you the full size version. Have you seen the? I've given to you, right? And I just had this thing where I need to do 3 versions, 3 pieces, and they're kind of a collection together. But that was my first real kind of attempt at any kind of art. But they're, as you know, they're very intricate, very technical.
Were the images pulled from memory of an experience you had while you were using the plant medicine? No. What was coming through you?
Were just, it was just I just had this. I saw a very rough sketch that someone made of like a cloud that was kind of in the form of a sculpture, and it was a column that just kind of rose up through the air and into the sky, and I was just very, very drawn to it. And then I thought, well, what if that was like a coral reef, but it was a cloud, and there were turtles, there were endangered species, and they were basically flying through the air, if you like, I mean, anyway, when we, you know, and it's not a new concept by any means, and but I just was drawn to it, and but it was kind of spiraling up, and you know, the eye gets drawn up, and you know, I just, and I think in one of them, there's two very tiny figures that sit at the base of like a canyon, and I use a canyon that opens up, and then you get this column that rises. And I think it was just all about going, you know, just realizing how insignificant I was, but how much a part of this tapestry of life that I was a piece of. And I kind of guess it was awe. It was just expressing awe and gratitude to life, and not to take for granted these incredible, you know, beings like whales, and you know, and these beautiful creatures.
Yeah. So I mean, just touching on what you were talking about earlier, back round to your experience of having your, would you call it a breakdown? Would you call it yeah. So before, did you have this reverence for nature before? Did you have this connection before, or was this, did it, like, was it a cracking open and a realization and an understanding of this new world?
Yeah, it's a really good word to use, reverence. No, well, maybe as a very, very young boy, as a child.
Yes. I think we all have that as a child.
But not as an adult. I think re-experiencing that as an adult, it felt very childlike, but it was more that I had matured. You know, that I had fully come into that place where I belonged. I mean, I did a post today on Facebook about, you know, I think the only responsibility any of us ever have is to understand our place, and then to take hold of it, and to express it, and to find a way to express who we are, and where we come from, and so I suppose it was an unlearning. When we say when you said cracking open, I think again it's that Han Solo. You know, I was there, but I just got stuck. We get stuck, and we need it releasing, and it takes us back to who we already were. It's not like we're giving something new that we never had before. It's just we're reminded of it.
Coming back to who we are. It's not a new experience, it's a remembered experience, perhaps, or an experience of what we did have but lost somehow growing up. You know, the reason I ask was because I remember, I think it's a sensual thing. It's about the senses, isn't it? I think poor mental health and poor emotional health numbs our senses, doesn't it? From what I've experienced. And when I was in my early 20s, I had an episode which I ended up on medication for, and then came off medication, but I was very, very unwell for a couple of years. But I remember one point where I had come off some medication, and my mental health was improving, my emotional health was improving, and it must have taken a big shift. And I remember stepping out of my front door, and every color and every scent was extreme. It was like I'd literally stepped into a new world. Something had happened to me, and I realized that's how life is. This is how our reality is. But our poor mental health and poor physical and emotional health blocks off those senses, doesn't it? And that's where our creativity lies, in that connection to what's around us. And if we're blocked off from that, our creativity just doesn't flow, does it?
It can't. It can't flow.
I just
we get
remember
very stuck.
that feeling of wow, everything is so colorful. And I'd not done any psychedelic drugs. So that kind of alternate sense of, or alternate reality, state of mind, I'd not been exposed to anything
Yeah.
that would heighten it. It was just myself coming back to
Yeah.
myself, so to
It's that
speak.
cracking, isn't it? That,
Yeah.
like you said, that I think the first kind of
Mm.
major fault line in my experience was when I had the final. I had 3 breakdowns. This was the third one, but this was the
Mm.
tsunami, because the other 2 I wasn't getting the message. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, we're going to have to up the ante here. We're going to have
Okay.
to really take it to another level. And I wouldn't say that I experienced it like you mentioned. I reckon there was still a real strong kind of freeze, and I'm just not sure about this. In a sense of, it was definitely happening, but I sensed in me somewhere a real strong reluctance.
Mm.
Um, and I do wonder whether that actually goes even way back to my birth,
Okay.
because I was born premature,
Mm.
10 weeks, and I was really, really unwell. Bless him, bless me. And I came out with club feet.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to do operations, they had to, sort of move them back round, and I
Yeah.
was in kind of stirrups, having my nappy changed, until I was, as my mom tells me, till I was, 4 or 5 years old, because I had to keep them up, keep these stirrups in place
So
for quite
you
a
were
long time,
physically actually stuck. You were
Yeah,
physically stuck for a long time.
yeah,
That was your
for a
first
long time.
experience of the
Yeah,
world. Oh,
yeah,
that's, yeah,
yeah.
fascinating.
I mean, I
Mm.
remember reading an article once, and I remember talking to my mum saying, um, what was the birth like? And she was a bit confused by the question, as which is fair enough. And she said, well, it wasn't easy. And I was thinking, yeah, probably not. But apparently the doctors have said to her, well, it's good that Adrian was 10 weeks premature, because actually that's probably what saved him from becoming a cripple.
Oh, wow.
And she actually
Yeah.
mentioned that to me again only the other day when I went up to see them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's fascinating how nature, life, it knows what to do, and we just have to we just get in the way.
Yeah,
you
we have to
know
trust the process, don't we? I
we
think
do,
that's when
yeah.
the problems come, when we stop
When we
trusting the
start,
process.
yeah, we start, and I think not trusting the process, for me, comes out in freeze. There's this freeze because I'm
Yeah.
not trusting the process. I'm not really sure what's going on here. I can't control it, so
Yeah.
I'm going to shut you down, and or that part of me that is still unconscious to some extent, or might be. But
Mm.
I think you go through these cycles, and gradually they get smaller and smaller and quicker, until eventually, actually, a lot of them you don't even notice, and you tend to jump through them, or you just tumble into the next one without really recognizing, and actually they start to even themselves out. And I
Yeah.
and I and I think the more art that I do, the easier it gets, obviously. But
Yeah.
it's not obvious to my body. It's definitely not obvious to my brain that's saying, well, you got that wrong.
Mm.
But the more I meet myself in that place and in that space,
Mm.
um of allowing, of of giving myself the safety, that and the permission, and the inner voice that says it's okay, the more creative I become, the more funny enough, the more creative orders that come in, the more orders on my website, the moment I let go, things start happening. It's like, oh, what? Why didn't I do this before? And then I'll go through a cycle and go, oh, let's not get too successful here, Adrian, because you don't
Yeah.
know what's
And
going to come around the corner,
start
and it's,
shutting yourself down
yeah,
again. Yeah, it's like a
yeah, yeah,
dam,
yeah.
isn't it? It's like the
It
water
is,
with a dam. It's we just have to lift it up, and it will
yeah,
flow. And
yeah.
trusting that process takes a lot of courage and a
It
lot of
does, yeah, it does.
work to lift those traumas out of the way, and
Mm,
to lift those blocks out of the way. So
mm,
um yeah, I find it a lot with music. And as I record, just going
yeah,
back to what you said, because that reminded me of what I do, that taking those 5 minutes
yeah.
away and coming back to it, I can sit and record something, spend an hour recording some vocals and come and just decide I hate it and scrap it. So I'm going to try the 5-minute technique.
Just before you press delete. And there are times when genuinely you go, actually it isn't right, and it's okay. But and of course sometimes that is quite fine, and but it's more, rather than being reactive, you're responding to the process.
Yes,
that's the difference, I think.
and
And that's
the difference.
It is, absolutely. So I think as I work through and I continue, I mean, I often write, I think if people, whoever's listening to this, they see an artist and they're drawn to them, let them know, because there's nothing more empowering than an artist to be recognized in whatever field it might be, whether it's visual, whether it's dance, whether it's music, whether it's whatever. But I mean, it's not critical, because the artist, you have to fundamentally do it for yourself, but as an extension, you then find the world's really interested in what you're doing, and they want to be part of it. And I mean, someone once described to me that, don't forget, artists are magicians. There are people that just haven't got a clue how you've just done something, and trust me, they will be in awe of you and lap it up, enjoy it, acknowledge it with respect and gratitude. And I have noticed that it's definitely happened to me, over the last few years, where I've genuinely had people come up to me and I've walked away with my jaw, on the floor, going, I can't believe what they just said to me. I'm sure that we're talking to the bloke over my shoulder. And it's lovely, and it's deeply, and it's all about connection. Our art is all about connection, and I often post about that on Facebook, on social media. It really is about connecting. So I've recognized that I've got to connect with myself first, and then I can start connecting with other people.
Connecting with others.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it is community, isn't it? And it's and it's tribal as well. Art, music, dance, all of it. It's how we communicate with each other's souls. Words also are creative, but it's that way of sharing with each other, isn't it, that's important. And art, the self-expression, sharing the core of who you are rather than the superficial of who you are. The creative part of us is deep.
Well, and I think what has amazed me whenever I've come along to your music workshops is that community connection is beautiful. And this whole idea, because you bust the myth, you break it down, that no one can sing, that everyone can sing.
Everyone can sing.
That everyone can sing.
Well, the myth is that no one can sing.
The myth is that no one can sing. But actually, I got in there and going, actually, but having sound that, and the right kind of sound, ultimately, well, not that even there is a right sound, but it's just the connecting sound, that connection is absolutely wonderful. And I've definitely experienced it. And we only did it a couple of weeks ago. We had a group,
we had another one,
which was beautiful, and deeply moving. So it's all, it's all about connecting with yourself, and then giving yourself permission to do that, and then by extension, you're going to connect with others.
And I think that if we look at how we lived years ago and how we lived tribally, it was all very creative, and we didn't have as many barriers between ourselves and as many boundaries between ourselves. I think, I mean, I don't know, because I don't have any direct memory of living tribally, but I imagine that, tribes would move as one. They would move collectively. So there had to be sort of thinner boundaries and barriers between them. I think today's society, there's so much fear of each other, isn't there? And I think that when we get creative together, that breaks a lot of that down, doesn't it?
That really is it's like that's the bridge that gives permission for people to cross it. I mean, as you probably know, I do the free workshops at the art fairs, and their mums and their daughters, dads and their sons, they'll sit down and they'll start doing stuff. Sometimes the adults will join in, but the kids are straight in there and they're having a go and they love it. And then the parents will start to talk, And it's a wonderful way. And then finally they'll look up and go, oh, did you do that? And I've got some art behind me. And I said, well, yeah, I did. And, and then they start talking about the art, which is obviously wonderful as well. But it creates this connection, and people start to relax and start to really come together. And it's a wonderful connecting device, as is music. I mean, there's nothing more extraordinary than music to do that. But art does, art in any form, in any sort of self-expression, it does it as well. So which is absolutely
it's
wonderful.
So directly linked to our spirituality and our soul's experience here. I mean, everything's linked to our soul's experience, but I believe that the creative process is almost like an unfiltered version of who's inside, isn't it? And what better world to live in where we're all sharing that direct experience.
Kind
of
but I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Particularly with what's going on at the moment, where there's almost an opposite of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think where we're losing that, and there's almost a reversal or a reaction to it. And I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it's a process which we have to go through, and there's a response to a certain scenario, and we need to kind of deal with that. But connection, we're either that's how war comes about, where there is absolutely no connection. It is completely there's a total disconnection. There is a almost beyond. It's not even there's just a total denial of the other, whoever that other might be, and only the self becomes ultimately so incredibly destructive. And that's what we've got to be careful of with the kind of stuff that's coming on and happening now, that we need to be really mindful of that. And it's a danger. It's not a good place to go to, which is why creativity is so important. And I think I often say is that invading armies, what are the first things that they do? They destroy, they silence the poets, and they burn the books, and they get rid of the art, or they treasure it. They'll take the art for themselves, but they'll take the soul of the country that they're invading, that they're occupying, and suppress them with it.
Take away the access to
you might hear that I've got a dog.
Another
making
dog.
I've got he's making a sound. Come here, boy, what's wrong? There we go. And I think that it's recognizing we have a choice. We can either be we can either choose to connect, or we can disconnect, but we've got to connect with ourselves first. I don't think you can actually go, I'm going to make the decision where I'm going to connect with someone else today. It actually doesn't work.
No,
not if you've not done it with yourself first, because you're going to be really disappointed. You'll find, well, actually they didn't, I went to speak to so and so, and he didn't look at me, or she didn't talk to me, or whatever. And you've got to. It's weird. You have to come from that connected place within yourself first, and then naturally you're drawn to people that are ready for that connection, and it's beautiful,
Yeah, and I think it's creativity as a healing process and a collective process is a really good. I think more creativity within the community is needed, and
really important.
And I think that I see the need for it, and I see the desire for it, and I see people want to do it, but it's just it still doesn't feel like there's that much that's accessible for people. There's not much awareness of the benefits. It's almost like it's deliberately not pushed at us as a healing modality.
It's almost suppressed, isn't it? And that's the battle. I mean, I'm reading a book at the moment called Art and Fear, I think it is, and there is this delineation between, again, why is it that an occupying force takes over another country and they silence the poets? They burn or steal the art. They plunder the art, whatever the treasures of that country. And because I think they're terrified of it.
Yeah.
They're absolutely terrified because they can't control it.
Well, if we're
Um,
self-connected and creative,
mm,
then we
you,
wouldn't be easily
you don't.
controlled, would we?
Yeah, yeah, and you don't need to fight. There's no that identity of, well, I am a soldier and I have a badge and I need to do, I've got an identity. It's almost this collision, um, but and it kind of oil and water. But I think the difference with when you're connecting is that you embrace them, where in actual fact the other side of that coin is a disconnection. There's two modalities, isn't it? The whole purpose of the mindset is to disconnect and to control, and then the creativity and that other side of it, the responsiveness, is to connect, to embrace, to behold, to flourish, to continue to flow, to share. There are no boundaries. The boundaries drop away. Or if there is a boundary, there's only one boundary, and it's the boundary of love. It's the boundary of compassion and recognizing the other side that isn't supportive or helpful.
To
It's
recognize where
destructive.
people are at. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah,
if that
yeah,
doesn't match, then there has to be a boundary there. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely. Yeah.
so for people that are kind of curious about art and may have never explored art, or their own art, I mean, in any form really, what would you say to them? What do you think? What do you think's good advice?
Start.
Start, yeah.
Just give it a go. It's in I always say, well, listen to your intuition. I've heard people say, listen to your intuition, and someone will look at you and go, well, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean listen to intuition? I think it's really trying to develop a mindset that is curious. That just, even if it's just asking questions, what would that feel like if I did this? And I think that's perhaps the best place that I've learned to come from, which is very much boundaried and cushioned with, and it's okay if it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Because you're just exploring, aren't you, Adrian? All right, yeah, I am. So okay, I'll give it a go. And then suddenly go, ooh, quite like that.
Yeah.
And then it's recognizing that, it's recognizing the feelings that and the positive ones that are coming up. And then it's kind of, if you think back to being child again, I mean, and I wrote a poem about it, I'm trying to think what the line was, but something around, that things are made of ease, that we as children, everything was easy. We never had to fight for something. Things happen. Now I know we've got parents and they feed us, and but I think it's breaking this myth that you can't, that's not, well, I've got to go out and I've got to earn money now. I've got to feed the family. I mean, that was the psychology that I got into, which ultimately broke me. It didn't help me at all. So I think in terms of someone first starting out, just be curious. So for example, it might be because you might need stabilizers. So you might want to go and get a book that gives you the 10 steps of how to draw whatever, an animal, a lion, a bird or whatever, and you follow the steps. And I kind of guess that's exactly what I did. I went to people that had done it before me, who were and follow and go to. So if an artist, for example, in my case, if they inspire you, ask you, kind of inquire why do they inspire you? Is it the color? Is it the shapes? Is it what is it about the individual that you're drawn to, and why? And then pick out the bits that you like, and it's probably amalgamation. And I do it all the time. I do it books, I do it with music, I do it. I mean, I used to go through this whole thing where I remember I caught myself, I'd never done it before, and I caught myself doing it only a few weeks ago, where I have so many notebooks and sketchbooks and stuff and books, and Kate goes mad at me going, you know, have you read that? Do you think you need that anymore? You can let that one go.
I can
And
hear her.
yeah, you can, yeah. And she's great, because actually you don't need it, because you don't need to, you know, but if I do hold on to stuff, it's art stuff and it's books and it's sketchbooks and notebooks and things like that. I love them. And I've got so many that, and this voice came up going, which was quite critical, saying, why don't you ever finish a notebook? And then very quickly, this other voice went in, who told you you had to? I was like, oh yeah. And because you go onto Instagram, you go on social media, and there's these perfect notebooks and these perfect artists, and they do these stuff, and I'm thinking, I can't do that. I mean, I've got some quite good sketchbooks actually, but they're very all over the place, and that's okay. You know, so really, you set your own rules. I think the trick is, and again, it's this learning, isn't it? If you're being creative and you're wanting to step into that world a bit, it's basically there are no rules. But sometimes it's almost like you need some rules, so like stabilizers to help you, and then you're going to get to a point where you can take the stabilizers off, and you've kind of learned the skill in whichever area it is, whether it's music, whether it's art, and then you kind of start to improvise. But it's kind of the improvisation and the skill learning start to blend together. And I've noticed that with my art, where I'm doing stuff that I would never have imagined myself being capable of even doing, or even considering doing, where now it's coming quite naturally. It's kind of happening, and I can even feel it in my body. And like with the Phoenix that I'm creating at the moment, you know, which is a huge piece of work, really, is the moment because on this one, I'm kind of going, again, it's problem solving. So it's taking it tiny bit of time. And because I haven't got an easel that can fit it, and I'm having to basically put it on a vertical wall. So essentially, if I put any water on it, or there's too much moisture, it will just run. And I'm thinking, whoa, I nearly did that the other day. And I thought, okay, because I don't want a streak coming all the way down. It's not really gonna, it's not kind of what I want. And obviously I am controlling it. That's what I'm looking for. I thought, oh, actually, hang on a minute. What I'll do is I'll use watercolor crayons. That will give me the outline. I don't need so much liquid or water or moisture. I just need a bit of moisture, and I can make that work. And suddenly, as soon as I started doing that, the piece started to open up, and color was starting to come through, and it starts to speak to you, and you're going, yeah, okay, this is working, and I can feel it in my body. So you're having a conversation. And I don't know whether you do find that with your music, because I know when you're in groups, and the way that you play with the groups, and how you kind of intuitively know who can sing what and where they can go. And you know, I've noticed that, you know, whenever I've joined one of your workshops, you know, it's beautiful the way that you do that. But it's that kind of thing. It's having a conversation with what you're doing. It's been really mindful and aware of it, and allowing that.
And allowing it to come through. I often feel when I'm teaching and singing, it's coming through me. So I'll have 5 parts to teach in a group, and sometimes I get a little bit panicky in my head that I can't remember what the next part is to teach to the next group. But I'll have this process of going, just open up, and it almost just comes through me. It's delivered to me. So even if I can't remember cognitively what that harmony part is, it's delivered to me. So there's something about opening up and connecting with that song, and becoming that song. It's probably the same with a piece of art. You become that piece of art.
You do. You're right.
Comes through you.
I saw my cousin Lexi, I'd not seen for a really long time, and she said, oh, I'd love to see some of your art. And I had my phone on me, and I said, okay, you know. So I scrolled through a few things, and I showed her something, and we got to the octopus, and she stayed on it for quite a while, and she said, and she saw some of the other more intricate bird work, as you know, that I do, which is slightly different in its energy, isn't it? And it's much more kind of, there's a graceness, there's a beauty, there's a kind of, there's a very velvety refinement. Yeah, there's a refinement to it. Yeah, there is. But yet there's that really exquisite beauty that seems to come through. But then there's that other style that I've started to develop a little bit more, which is very kind of explosive, colorful. But it's also, she said, this is so cheeky. I think that's what she said. To me, or something like that, and I said, well, yeah, you know, she said, you know what, because I mean, we used to play as little, you know, when we were very little, you know, my sister and her sister, you know, the four of us, you know, my sister and myself, and then Lexi and her sister Natasha, and we'd play all together, and we had this like butterfly club, and you know, my grandmother's garden and all this sort of stuff, but she kind of connected with it and went, yeah, this is Adrian as a boy playing.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah,
that's lovely.
Yeah. And the fact that she picked that up in the piece, I kind of went, yeah, that is it. That's all we're trying to do. That's it. I've done my job's done. I can go home now. Done it. I've, you know,
come full circle to who you were. Yeah.
So
don't go yet. Yeah. We need more artwork.
No. You've got to stick around.
You can't go home yet.
Yeah, you can't go. Yeah.
Cancel
what's that
the
phrase?
UFO. They can't come and get you yet.
Yeah. What's the phrase? We're leading each other home.
Yeah, that's a lovely one, isn't it? Yeah.
Which is a beautiful phrase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I think we could wrap it up now. So what I'd like to do is just invite you to just tell us about where we can find you online, where we can find you're exhibiting at the moment, aren't you? I saw something in St Albans, perhaps. Am I right?
That's it. Yeah, there's something. It's the St Albans Museum. I kind of submitted it, and you know, or they asked me to. I can't remember which way around it was. And one of the pieces was Soaring Joy, which was a commissioned hummingbird piece that I did a year or so ago now. Might be 2 years ago, and the next thing I knew, Kate was in St Albans walking down the high street. They'd printed it onto these big boards and they put it up as a kind of intro to the main exhibition of some kind inside the museum, St Albans Museum on the high street. And so so there's a piece there on public view until the end of this month, I think. And then on Facebook, it's just Adrian Michael Wildsmith. I think if you type in Adrian Wildsmith, I think I'll come up. And I tend to be, Facebook is kind of the main sort of platform that I connect with people with. But I have a website, which is adrianwildsmithartist.com, and I do have Instagram as well. And if you just you know, Google sort of search for Adrian Wildsmith Artist, you know, you'll find me in pretty much most places. But they're my kind of main areas. But Facebook, my website, and Instagram, and yeah, I sell. I do commission work. You know, my art is up there, and I do all sorts.
You sell prints and products as well.
The prints, yeah. I'm just releasing a collection of greeting cards.
Excellent. Well, it's been great speaking to you. Thanks ever so much for
Cheryl. Thank you so much
for sharing your knowledge and sharing your experience. And
appreciate that.
I'll share all the info on when I post this up on social media. All right. Thanks ever so much.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.